right? And as you scale, then you can, you know, you can grow into your OKRs. But back to the topic is really where you're going to see that we have the ability to grow as the company pivots, right? So our next performance review might be that marketing has added specific things that are tied to something where we pivoted in the business, right? And we want to call those things out. This is what's beautiful about Profit, right? It's very easy to modify, add, change, delete, you know, archive, whatever we want to do with those questions. So that's where we were. I selected Profit over other companies because they're just, in my opinion, antiquated, where the employee, this is painful enough for them. You want this to be quick, easy, you know, very user friendly, so that somebody's not intimidated by it. They're basically go into the platform and say, oh my God, this looks pretty easy. I can just answer these questions, tell them what I did, and I'm done, right? So it's really helped ease the sort of pressure, right, on the individual doing the performance evaluation. And likewise on the manager side, where they have the opportunity to read and hear the voice of their employee, right? And then contemplate that before they have the meeting. So that's very meaningful, I think, to both sides of the equation.
Sure, that's awesome. So you have very wide experience in the technology space, and particularly you mentioned that creating the infrastructure for all people processes and recruitment, and specifically with respect to compliance, right? And in this context, right, if we look at the before and after, right, of the new performance management system that you have brought in to Banyan, right? So what was the methodology, or what process did you follow before, and how did you really envisage a new vision, right, for performance management, right? What do you think are the critical differences in terms of before and after, and what is the value that has delivered actually?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't have deep historical knowledge here. I came in and I was given a set of questions. I think there were 5 questions that they asked every single solitary employee. And I was like, this is not really a performance evaluation on the person. It's about the company, right? And how you're feeling, which is not really a performance evaluation. That's employee engagement. And those are things that you do in a survey. Those are not the questions. We can keep them, which, our CEO was really adamant because he wanted to get that pulse on how people were feeling. But then it's like, we have to dive deeper into what these individuals are doing so that we can help them set their goals, understand where their learnings are. We don't call them failures. It's basically we didn't make the cut here, and here's why, and here's what we need to do to not have that happen again, right? So I think saying this, it's really about, I'm trying to see how I can answer your question. What my objective is to say, we'll keep the 5 questions, but now we're going to do a deep dive into each business unit. I talk to the leaders, the hiring managers, right? To ensure that we're asking them questions that are specific to what they do, right? This helps them with A, setting their goals, B, with succession planning. It takes it from there. So it's all in the way you're framing the question. It's like, where have you been? Where are you? And where are we going to go? Right. Okay. So you can get that out of the question, and you can customize that and modify it, as you pivot. Sure.
I think that's great. So from, a set of questions which were primarily focusing on the culture or employee engagement, or the pulse, right, of the organization, you have actually broadened the scope really to cover all aspects of performance and helping the employees really with goal setting, right? And as well as capturing their learnings. I really liked the way you put, right, about it's not about failure, but it's really about learning. And that's really a great, I would say, cultural indicator, right, of how probably you lead the people aspect, right? That's quite amazing. And earlier in the interview, okay, you had mentioned that performance reviews are a process which a lot of times, in general, employees dread about it. They don't really feel very comfortable about it. They want to get it done, right? And there's a manager angle as well, right? Managers also, don't always find the process to be a very easy one to go through, right? So, in your view, right, what are the traditional challenges of performance review process, and how are you really mitigating those challenges in your organization?
So I think doing it in Excel obviously is like common, very typical for a very small startup. But what you do by getting into a platform and aggregating that data into one place, you're not going into file after file after file. You're going into the platform, basically type in the person's name. You can go back to that for historical reference point. So say you're in your performance evaluation and you have this goal, right? You can always go back and say, this is what my goal, how am I tracking against that goal, right? And, again, there's some companies which I always advise to do at least a minimum of 2, not performance evaluations, but really a checkup, right? So where are we? This particular company, they only want to have 1 a year. I always advise to do it, every 6 months at least, or every quarter is optimal. Simply because you can track against those goals. And you can also then capture if there was a switch, because if you don't capture that in mid-flight or in flight, by the end of the year, you're going to forget about it. And that's going to dilute the yearly performance evaluation, because you will forget that you were pulled into another project, which means it pulled you off your goal. Right? And do you want to set like a really tight goal? So if the goal is really targeted towards a certain thing, and somebody is then called away to do something that is really important for the product, then obviously that takes precedence, but that needs to be captured because it can impact you when you do the annual review. So I love that you guys are able to do that. Some companies will do that quarterly. And I don't typically, when I'm in startups that are open to that, it's not a performance review. It's really just a quarterly check. Everything going okay? Where did we pivot? How did we do when we pivoted? So if I got pulled into that project, then that's another sort of level of or layer of information that you want to add to that, to where, yes, I got pulled into this project. Yes, we got it done. It was done on time, but how did that impact the original overall goal? So you articulate that and you then tell a complete story, right? You have full context into the story that you're going to be talking about in the annual review.
Sure, great.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's quite, I would say, quite insightful, and thanks a lot for sharing that. Now, what was your experience, Kay, while onboarding Profit.co, right? Or how did that go? I mean, was the switch from your earlier methodology to the new one, was it simple enough? How did you feel about that?
It was extremely seamless, great customer support. They helped me. I just basically took a CSV, uploaded everything into the system, and we, again, just started with these initial 5 overall questions. And then from there, it was just showing where things were in the platform. One of the challenges, and this isn't for you, and I would recommend this to every company, is if I am only in this system once a year, I'm going to forget where things are. And then I may want to reorganize. So for this year, the company has grown tremendously from when I first started, right? So I literally had to go back with customer success and say, this thing is all over the place. I can see that now. Now I need to just get it into marketing. Like, here's your overall head of, say, marketing. And then I need to drill down into what kind of marketing person are they, because they have very different skill sets. Then, you might have somebody who's in content marketing, and then you have somebody who's in like a completely different part of marketing, right? So that was really easy as well. So what has been fabulous throughout that particular shift for me is working incredibly close with your team. We're actually on Google Chat so that I can reach my CSM like in real. I know we're not on the time zones, but I know that, I'm not going to have to wait for an email. And sometimes we're just working in real time, right? And we get things fixed really fast. So, again, I think the platform's easy enough to use, right? But it's really thinking deeper than that and on a broader scale in terms of those competencies and keeping those fluid and keeping those current, right? And that's why I'm a big believer of doing quarterly check-ins, right? Because that really helps HR do their job better, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So which means you believe that doing a continuous performance evaluation or even just a check-in, right? It's not a performance evaluation every quarter, but it's a check-in every quarter, and then probably annually or twice a year we do a real performance evaluation, right? So that's the model that you are suggesting.
Yeah, and it's not all of those same questions. So if you have a quarterly check-in, that's where you would then identify the goals that you did in the initial annual review, right? So you'll build a layer under that and say these are our goals. Even if you do it quarter by quarter, right? It's like this. In our annual performance, this is what we wanted you to do by the end of this quarter, right? Did you achieve it? Did you change? Did you get pulled into another project? So you're constantly building your journey throughout that year. You're building the story, right? And I think having that sub layer on a quarterly review where you identify the target and then track against it. And it's not so much about I'm going to give you a rating or anything in. It's simply a checkup, right? And capturing where you've been, where you are, and what's the next step in the journey, right? So that way, it's not a performance review. It's simply a check-in to keep everybody in check. The manager, the employee, the department, right?
Sure. Awesome. That's absolutely great. So now, how many performance reviews have you done? Have you done one or more performance cycles?
We did one last year at this company, and we just finished one for 2022, which was, a lot easier because I already kind of knew where things were, but I had the challenge that had to do with growth. And I had to kind of think about, okay, how am I going to do this? Because we didn't have all these departments, and I had to go back and really recreate it again. So I'll probably continue if I ever come up for air to go back and check that just to see if I have my competencies built, that everything is really streamlined, straightforward, easy to find. And then as I add employees, right, which I hadn't been doing in the previous year because we did the performance, like we had to get it done like that. This made it simple, easy, speedy. We just got it done, right? But go back inside the competencies and then make sure that every person I onboard, because last year, yes, we added everybody into the system, but I didn't tie them to a competency, right? Because I was just busy, whatever, it doesn't matter. I did not do that. So I was in a crunch to get that done, right? And ensure that everybody was, fix the competencies first, then assign those competencies to these different positions, because I am getting more granular. And yes, it's more work when you're granular, but that's okay, because that impacts having a sound culture that understands that we are being transparent. There's all these things that impacts from an emotional perspective of both sides and takes the emotion out of it, and you focus on the goal.
Great, excellent. And now, the two reviews that you have done so far, in it, there are, I would say, different types of users, right? So you have individual employees, right, who go through the process. You have managers, and you have, I would say, either executives or administrators like you who are, really overseeing the whole process and running the whole process, right? So, what has been the experience for these three different types of users, right, with Profit.co?
Very easy. Like, no one has had any issues with them. We're common like any company where you set a target date, and especially in startup, you never make the target date, which is fantastic about this platform, is I can push it out depending on time and pulling even this small group together. But no problems with, anything at all. So if somebody can't access things, I can go back and reset things very easily to get them back on track in real time. So I think the flexibility of the platform, right, is super, super helpful, right? When employees said, oh, I forgot, I wanted to put something this back in, so I can backdate that before the meeting, and they can ensure they get their thoughts in there. So I think it really, the experience for the overall departments, everybody is really happy because it's really fast and it takes the emotion out of it.
Great, awesome, that's great. So now, just maybe a couple of more questions. One, what do you think is the overall value that you have really derived out of the new performance process, right? And I'm saying both the process as well as the technology, right? So if you have to say the value, normally people look at it as, has it made things simpler, faster, better, right? Has it reduced time, or, how do you really put the value that you have received qualitatively and quantitatively? Okay.
I think from a quality perspective, it's fantastic because we're capturing everything we want to capture. I mean, next level is to try to talk them into doing, either, quarterly or at least 2 a year. So from a quality perspective, I think everybody loves it. I have to do mine with the CEO, and he loves it because he can just speed right through it because he doesn't have a lot of time, right? And it's like, you don't have to make them really long, but it's like, no, you have to listen to the voice of that employee, right? So I think it's just been really fast. Department heads love it because they don't have to do anything. It's click through, right? In terms of speed and accuracy, easy because the system is flexible. So, I can push and pull employees in and out of the system very quickly and archive them, but I'm keeping that historical reference point for future, for compliance, for all of that stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reports and dashboards, are you finding them useful, Kay, in the system? Do you use any of them?
Yeah, I do. I mean, again, I'm not using this like every day, but I really relied on the reports when I was doing this 2022. I ran a full report, and occasionally I will run reports to ensure that, I archived, which is really part of our offboarding process now, is that I archive people at the offboarding stage. So, if we had an HRIS system, I've built an organic HRIS in Airtable at this company, and I can easily open up an API to go directly to Profit, which would be great. We're not there yet, but it would be brilliant because then all of that data would just be moving at the same rate. What would be great, I think, and super helpful, and hopefully you have this in your product roadmap, is to have the ability to actually produce a performance letter, or if you've got somebody who goes on a PIP, is to have forms in there that we can actually send to to the employee to sign in app. So that those performance letters, then we come full circle with it, right? Where we've scheduled the meeting. The last step is to identify whatever that employee is going to get as a result of the performance evaluation, have those templates in there and available so that they are signed by the manager or the CEO, whoever is the signatory in the company. And then that gets automatically pushed through the system and that employee accepts it, right? And then you've got a full bodied story of an employee. And then if you want it, if that ties to your HRIS, that should shift that data. That would take off a lot of work. That's the only piece of it right now for me is then I have to take these results, right? And I have to then create them in another system, right?
Sure.
And then upload them to an employee profile, which if we had this all working, you would have a full-bodied platform and then tie that to your HRIS, and then everything will be, again, in one secure place.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a very valuable feedback. And, would love to, talk more on that front, right? Maybe in the coming days to see how we can actually improve your experience even further, right? Absolutely. So now, okay, now that you've gone through 2 cycles, what next? How are you envisioning, continuously improving your performance management? Any thoughts that you have? You already mentioned about, your plans or your thoughts on bringing OKRs and performance management together. Any thoughts that you would like to share in terms of your vision?
Yeah, my vision is, and I've been trying to sell the leadership on the fact that we should do OKRs, but they feel like we're too small. I mean, I've just built so many startups. My belief is that you have OKRs is what save you in the end, no matter how small or how large you are, because you're tracking and you can track with those OKRs. I think for the future, it for me is just trying to shave some time out of my busy schedule to go back and look again, just to make sure everything is perfect the way I want it in the competencies. So it's just easy, right? And just keeping those things very clear. And occasionally, if we get a new position, right, which right now we're pretty stable on the roles at this point, but as I get a new position, working that into when we open the rec, I want to be able to build that competency in simultaneously so that everything is done. So by the time I hire against that rec and I bring that person into profit, they will be assigned to that new position and the competencies are already established. Great. That will save me a ton of time.
Sure. That's awesome. Any advice that you have for companies planning to implement, performance management with Profit.co? What would be your advice?
My advice is to, use the system because it's easy, it's secure, customer success is fantastic, but more than anything, it is highly flexible. So you're not having to shut down a whole review. It's just so flexible that it takes a lot of pressure off of HR when changes happen, when we have to push it out. And this is at every company, we're always pushing it out, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, so my advice to everybody is to use this platform because it's really easy to use. It does everything you need it to do and then some. So I think it allows you, some people will start at the OKR level, right? And then add that performance later. In our case, it's the reverse to where, I can always, as we grow, say, are you guys ready for OKRs? I don't need to look for anything because I already have that built in. Awesome. So we would not have to go and get another system.
Sure. Great. So thank you very much, Kay. And I think it's been a very insightful interview where you really shared your thoughts on problems with traditional performance management and how you have actually used Profit.co, over just 2 cycles, to really unlock a lot of value, right, for your organization. And you have a very compelling vision, right, for the coming days and weeks, where you're thinking of bringing in even OKRs, and that's quite amazing. And we really appreciate you joining today and sharing your thoughts, right? So thank you very much, Kay, and good luck for your continuing success. Okay, thank you.